Board members, please take your seats. We're going to get started. I know, right? I will convene this public hearing. Before I turn over to Ms. Tolan to run the ESSER public hearing, we need to certify our closed meeting. So in order to comply with Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia, it is necessary for the board to certify that since the Fairfax County School Board convened a closed meeting on November 3rd, 2022, to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board during the closed meeting. Do I have a motion? Ms. Omesh, is there a second? Ms. Corbett-Sanders, all those in favor? It is Ms. Cohen, Mr. Frisch, Dr. Anderson, Dr. Anderson, Mr. Aaron Kofax, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, Ms. Tolan, Ms. Omesh, and Ms. Pekarsky. That motion passes. I will turn over to Ms. Tolan for the ESSER public hearing.
Yes, good evening and welcome to the public hearing on the ESSER funding. On behalf of school board members, I would like to thank you for taking time this evening to come and talk to us about this portion of our budget. Ms. McLaughlin, Ms. Marin, and Ms. Keys-Gamara have submitted written requests to virtually attend this evening's meetings. All those in favor of allowing them to virtually attend, please raise your hand. Okay, that is everyone at the table. Thank you. Tonight, 7 speakers have registered to address the board during this hearing. When your name is called, a speaker should approach the podium and begin speaking. Each speaker is allotted 2 minutes, and we ask that you stay within that time limit. Your remarks must address the ESSER funds. If you have not registered to speak tonight but would like an opportunity to address the board, please see the clerk to sign up for one of the 5 extra speaker slots. Your name will be called after the registered speakers have shared their comments. I will now ask our clerk to call the first speaker.
Our first speaker is Norm Hall.
Good evening. This is my 3rd public testimony on ESSER 3 funding. The April 2021 Federal Register notice announcing the regulations called for stakeholder input that would be provided at least every 6 months, and that this input would be taken into account by decision makers producing ESSER 3 plans, which, to be clear, were as much about program activities as they were about spending plans, which is essentially what FCPS has. What is currently posted on board docs does not reference detailed school plans that speak robustly to health issues that the coronavirus pandemic unleashed upon school-age populations and communities. The materials do not speak to the group of students, teachers, and staff who will be returning to schools following newly acquired COVID, flu, and other respiratory illnesses that are now currently the concern of our Fairfax Health Department. Also omitted is any discussion about students, teachers, and staff who may be dealing with mid and long-term COVID symptoms, including decreased stamina and brain fog. This isn't history involving past COVID cases. Meeting the needs of these students will be an increasing challenge that should have been the focus of some work before now. I have seen no evidence that it has been. I was hoping to see such a discussion prior to this public hearing. Canceling the work session on Tuesday suggests that there were higher priorities than the health and education of those in the community that are threatened by microorganisms. I call for a public response that demonstrates that public health matters are a strategic priority for Fairfax County Public Schools. For starters, I would like to see a process that builds up accommodations for returning students that are based on homebound services along with group tutoring models, which would have been discussed by now had my prior testimony actually been taken into account. Well, better late than never. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kathy Hozek.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Hozek, and I am a member of the Education Committee of the Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Association. Tonight, I'm speaking on behalf of the Federation's Education Committee. We would like to begin our remarks by thanking you for holding this hearing and to recognize the work of your grant administrators, such as Evangeline Petrich, for engaging in community outreach. By coming together, we not only ensure that spending reflects our community's values, but just as important, we sharpen our ideas through continual honest exchange. To date, a great deal of ESSER spending has proceeded in a decentralized fashion, with decisions and communications about those decisions operating school by school. This approach holds significant advantages as it permits each school to operate as a creative laboratory of its own, attempting innovative solutions to see what works for a particular community. We are concerned, however, that the valuable data from these experiments is not being properly gathered, analyzed, and communicated to the public in a centralized fashion. These programs created through ESSER to date provide a treasure trove of information which can help us ensure that we are only implementing evidence-based practices and thus spending our money wisely. Schools need direct comparisons to understand which ideas performed above the scatterplot line and analysis to understand why. As we engage in interventions that promise to help students with both learning loss and emotional wellness, we must ensure funds are spent with not just good intention, but with strong positive effect. This analysis will become crucial as FCPS decides which new practices are important to sustain absent ESSER funding. Thank you for your time and for all the time you spend on various matters.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Tracy Compton.
I have two daughters that attend Oakview Elementary in the Braddock District. I've been very disappointed in how ESSER funds have been spent in FCPS, and specifically how they've been spent in my children's school. The bottom line up front is that our children are behind, and direct academic supports are critically needed for reading and math to provide in-person interventions for all of our children, but especially those that are most behind. Last year, the only tangible spend of ESSER fund that I witnessed was an after-school club for my kids. My youngest enrolled in the Foodie Friends Club. In one of these sessions, they made pizza shish kebabs. Since FCPS invested in this club to increase my child's outcome in school, I'll be demonstrating to you, showing you how they are made, because maybe it'll improve your performance as a board. I tried this week to find last year's budget to make sure I remembered everything in it. Honestly, it was hard to tell what was in it because I can't seem to find those documents online anymore. I do remember that in addition to these super fancy miracle working learning recovery kebabs, ESSER funds were proposed for a bus to take Robinson High School students literally, and I mean literally, across the street to the my children's elementary school, like 10 steps from the street. And they purchased some curriculum, but I'm not really sure how or if or what or any measurable benefit from it. My daughters both have 504s and currently require Tier 2 supports. They had real struggles before you lock them out of school. The decision you made as a board made their struggle even worse. But sure, fix it with these learning recovery kebabs. How about spending it on helping your children catch up to all the states that chose science over union fear and political pressure?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Vanessa Hall.
My name's Vanessa Hall. I'm a graduate of FCPS and have two children in the schools. Whether you accepted science or conspiracy theories, the pandemic affected us all. Fear and uncertainty about the future trickled down into our children's lives. Therefore, they need support via ESSER funds, particularly in the areas of special education and mental health. Unfortunately, I understand the ESSER meeting was canceled this week and its work went undone because of unresolved internal conflicts. Meanwhile, a sophomore died at my son's high school and my 90-pound daughter was assaulted, again, in middle school. Over 9 years in FCPS, my daughter's experienced bullying, including physical harm due to her learning disabilities. Her school takes swift and appropriate actions, but the underlying problems continue. While you were in your closed meeting on Tuesday, my daughter was punched in the stomach. I'm asking you to put away your anger and do the work to use ESSER funds to increase kindness and reduce bullying across our schools. You will save lives. School board conflict has been playing out for months. Constituents are dismayed while detractors are gleeful. There's no way that this does not distract from your critical work on behalf of students, teachers, and families. Please set aside anger and refocus on what our schools must do to meet every child by name and by need. Some people speaking today plan to be on the school board in the future. Some embrace cruelty, intolerance, disinformation for the purposes of acquiring power over FCPS. Truthfully, no one can govern a school system with anger and intolerance in their heart. It has to be done with love, kindness, skill, and support for all students. Please return to doing the work of public education. Distribute these ESSER funds appropriately. Ensure that our students and teachers have a safe, supportive environment for learning. Otherwise, what do we even have here? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sandra Davis.
I'm here today to ask you to use the ESSER funds to finish what you start. The American Institute for Research report on special education found a concerning lack of fidelity in implementing special education across schools. So it goes with the ESSER funding. You took $55 million, handed it down to the school level, and then declared your job finished. While the dyslexic students at Bonnie Bray Elementary are benefiting from their teachers' Orton Gillum reading instruction, dyslexic students at the Title I Braddock Elementary are stuck with just words, which the publisher itself says is not suitable for kids with dyslexia. And when just words fails these kids at Braddock Elementary, you'll point to the parents for failure to reinforce literacy and language acquisition skills at home, or imply it's gone wrong with the children themselves. Despite the U.S. Department of Education mandate that students with disabilities be evaluated for compensatory services, only 1 in 25 has these services mentioned on their IEP. Per the information you all sent to the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. Is that one lone student actually receiving those services? Are those services high quality? Do you even know? This brings us back to finishing what you started. You set aside $9.50 per special education student of ESSER 3 funds for compensatory service. You had to cut, well, it was $19, still a joke, but let me guess. You had to cut it to cover legal fees for lawsuits because parents have had it. It's not enough. Start reallocating money away from unsound, unscientific interventions like just words and towards the science of reading, and make that reallocation stick, please.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Deborah Tisler. Our next speaker is Jennifer Tidd. That was our final speaker.
Thank you for attending tonight's public hearing and for sharing your comments and concerns. This hearing is adjourned.
We will now convene the Peace Valley Lane public hearing. Good evening and welcome to the public hearing on Peace Valley Lane land acquisition. 3 speakers have registered to address this topic. If you have not registered to speak tonight but would like an opportunity to address the board, please see the clerk to sign up for one of 5 extra speaker slots. When your name is called, speakers should approach the podium and begin speaking. Each speaker is allotted 2 minutes, and we ask that you stay within that time limit. Your remarks must address the Peace Valley land acquisition. I will now ask our clerk to call the first speaker.
Our first speaker is Kathleen Brown.
Good evening. I would respectfully ask that one school board member move this item off the consent agenda to allow for more public discussion of this very complex issue. Regarding the school board resolution that there remain questions that arise, such as the resolution states the acquisition of the land will enable Fairfax County to construct a sidewalk along the south side of Peace Valley Lane to improve pedestrian access for students, faculty, and staff to and from Justice High School. And yet the project will be constructing a sidewalk on the north side of the street. And the county has set aside money instead for a long petition sidewalk for Ravenwood Park Association, which likely seeks one sidewalk only between Peace Valley Circle and Mansfield Road. The school board resolution presumes the county sidewalk largely to fulfill school interests, yet no mention of the community intentions here. Why is that? Was a conservation easement required on the school side of the street because of the topography of the land and trees situated there? Does this resolution argument that the school has maintained the 25-foot strip of land continuously by the school board's facility staff and not the park authority since 1950 stand up to scrutiny? Just this week, I asked a crew mowing the parkland down to the curb who they were doing this for, and they said, for the park authority. Is this 25-foot strip needed for the FAR, floor area ratio, for the project? Why, when the school was just rezoned from R3 to R8? Has a diligent effort been made to identify the heirs of the Nevius? As in this resolution, you state they cannot be reached. Two are in the area. Theodore Nevius is in DC on Reservoir Road, and Catherine Nevius is in Annapolis or Easton, Maryland. Perhaps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mark Donert.
You all have an incredibly difficult job. Thank you for serving. Ravenwood Park's 2016 petition asked for lit sidewalks or pathways so one can safely walk from Ravenwood Park to Mansfield Drive and to Justice Park without walking in the street. And since FCPS prohibits animals, one cannot always use the school parking lot. We did not specify where, we just said the need. Transportation experts and comprehensive planning should say where. My key questions: where exactly is the 25-foot strip on what we know today? Why no land surveys? We FOIA'd and we're told none existed. Boundaries are important. If it's nearly all land on the Justice Park side, then why would FCPS take title of all of it instead of a natural division of the street to FCPS and just south, Justice Park to the Park Authority, since both FCPS and Parks have land acquisition authority and to condemn? One understanding is just 3 feet on Peace Valley Lane and 22 feet into the park. If this is the case, then part of the Justice Park sign would seem to become a sign on school property. How does the record and the history show FCPS intended to take that land when we can see otherwise? A July 1962 Lake Parkhoff newsletter article describing the future of Justice Park stated, quote, the proposed park site is ... southwest of Jeb Stuart High School bounded by Peace Valley Lane. The 1986 and 2009 park master plans for what's now the park show the park boundary extending to and even the south ends of Peace Valley Lane. So for at least 37 years, master plans show the park is coming up to Peace Valley Lane. Look too at the county aerial photography with land boundaries from 1937, 53, and 60 that I included in the PDF file I submitted. And why was there no mention of coordination with the Park Authority, Mason District Supervisor? What's the integrated FCPS Park County pedestrian plan for Peace Valley? Stormwater runoff to the stream is also bad. And why was there no outreach to the community in the neighborhood? The first time we got notified was via your email, Dr. Anderson. It's a deja vu on the whole Justice Park High School.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Peter Jones.
Thank you for working in the evening. Really appreciate it. I'm a school teacher in Alexandria City Public Schools, and I just came from Justice Park, where my wife and I, we volunteer as the invasive management area volunteer coordinators. And so just to give you a little background on the possibility of that encroachment upon the park, it's, that would affect 7 mature trees, species varying in oak, maple, cherry, tulip tree, arbor vitae, beautiful species representing about 80 to 150 years of growth. Not to mention potential for, if there is construction there, Just the compaction of soil. Soil is 50% air, and compaction from heavy machinery and whatnot would basically, could over time really suffocate the trees, even if they don't immediately die. But some of these trees would actually are within that line, so they have to be cut down. The other thing to note would be that for the volunteer hours, just in the past year from November to November, we've had 480 volunteer hours with 130 different volunteers. So we really do have, this is for invasive management, invasive management area, removing invasive species from the perimeter of the park. So there has been a lot of progress in the park, a lot of volunteers. There's a lot of community involvement in that, and we would just like to see the integrity of the park maintained. Even 20 feet in from the road would have a long-term effect on the ecosystem there. Thank you for your time, and thank you for serving the community.
Thank you to all those who've shared their comments this evening. This public hearing is adjourned. The board will take a brief recess till 7 p.m.